The morning sun cast golden rays across Westminster Abbey as thousands gathered along the streets of London. People from every corner of the world had traveled to witness this historic moment. Prince William stood in the ancient abbey, his heart racing as he prepared for the ceremony that would crown him King of England. The weight of history pressed down on his shoulders like the heavy robes he wore. Inside the abbey, dignitaries from around the globe sat in their designated seats. Television cameras captured every angle, broadcasting live to over 2 billion viewers worldwide. The Archbishop of Canterbury held the St. Edward's crown, its precious stones catching the light from the stained glass windows. Everything had been planned to perfection, rehearsed countless times. William's mind wandered to his late mother, Princess Diana, and his father, King Charles, whose recent passing had brought this moment sooner than anyone expected. The young prince had always known this day would come, but he never imagined it would arrive when he was still processing his grief. His wife, Catherine, stood nearby, offering silent strength with her presence. The ceremony began with traditional hymns that echoed through the centuries-old walls. William walked slowly down the aisle, each step measured and deliberate. The crown jewels sparkled under the abbey's lights, and the smell of incense filled the air. Foreign leaders, celebrities, and common citizens alike watched in reverence, as history unfolded before their eyes. As the Archbishop began the sacred rituals, William felt the enormous responsibility settling upon him. He thought about the promises he was about to make to his people, to serve and protect them for the rest of his life. The ancient words of the coronation ceremony carried the weight of 1,000 years of British monarchy. Every gesture, every word had been carefully preserved from generation to generation. The moment approached when the crown would be placed upon his head. William closed his eyes briefly, saying a silent prayer for wisdom and strength. The abbey fell into complete silence, with only the soft whisper of fabric and the distant sound of crowds outside. Television viewers around the world leaned forward in their chairs, knowing they were witnessing a moment that would be remembered for generations. The Archbishop lifted the St. Edward's crown high above William's head. The golden artifact, encrusted with precious stones and steeped in history, caught the light magnificently. Every person in the abbey held their breath. The cameras zoomed in on William's face, showing a mixture of determination, humility, and deep emotion. His hands trembled slightly as he prepared to receive the crown that would make him king. Just as the Archbishop began to lower the crown, something completely unexpected happened. A small figure emerged from the crowd of dignitaries. It was Prince George, William's young son, who had somehow slipped away from his designated seat. The little boy, dressed in his formal attire, walked confidently toward his father, completely unaware of the millions of eyes upon him. The Archbishop paused, unsure whether to continue with the ceremony or wait. The abbey remained silent, but every person present could feel the shift in the atmosphere. This was not part of the rehearsal, not part of the ancient protocol that had been followed for centuries. Security personnel started to move, but William raised his hand slightly, signaling them to stop. Prince George approached his father with the innocent confidence that only children possess. He looked up at William with bright, curious eyes, completely unfazed by the grandeur surrounding them. The little prince had something in his small hand, but from a distance, no one could see what it was. The cameras captured every second of this unplanned moment, broadcasting it live to billions of viewers worldwide. William looked down at his son with a mixture of surprise and overwhelming love. In that instant, the formality of the ceremony seemed to fade away. Here was not just a future king receiving his crown, but a father sharing an incredible moment with his child. The weight of the crown above his head suddenly felt less important than the small boy standing before him. The silence in the abbey was profound. Everyone present understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. something that would be talked about for decades to come. This was not just a coronation anymore, it was becoming a moment that would define how people remembered this historic day. The ancient ceremony had been touched by the pure innocence of childhood, creating something beautiful and unexpected. Prince George reached into his small pocket and pulled out a simple handmade bracelet. The colorful beads looked childish and out of place among all the gold and precious stones surrounding them. The little boy had made it himself during craft time at school, carefully choosing each bead with his father in mind. The bracelet was nothing more than plastic beads strung together with elastic, but to George, it was his most precious creation. William knelt down to his son's level, the heavy, ceremonial robes pooling around him on the ancient stone floor. The archbishop still held the crown above them, frozen in this unexpected pause. George held up the bracelet with both hands, his face serious and determined. He had been thinking about this moment all morning, waiting for the right time to give his father this special gift. The cameras captured every detail of the handmade bracelet. Viewers around the world could see the uneven spacing of the beads, the simple knots where George had tried to secure the elastic, and the bright primary colors that only a child would choose. Among the priceless artifacts and ceremonial regalia, this humble creation stood out like a beacon of pure love and innocence. George whispered something to his father, his small voice carrying in the silent abbey. Though the microphones couldn't pick up his exact words, lip readers later revealed that he said, "For luck, Papa," like Mama Diana would have wanted. The mention of his late grandmother sent a visible wave of emotion across William's face. His eyes filled with tears that he struggled to contain. William's hands shook as he reached out to accept the bracelet. The simple gesture from his son meant more than all the ceremony and pageantry surrounding them. In that moment, he wasn't receiving the weight of kingship. He was receiving the unconditional love of his child. The bracelet represented everything, pure and good in the world, untainted by politics or protocol. The archbishop, recognizing the profound nature of this moment, made a decision that would be debated for years to come. Instead of rushing to continue the ceremony, he waited patiently, allowing this father and son to have their moment. The elderly clergyman, who had presided over many royal ceremonies, understood that he was witnessing something far more precious than any ritual. Catherine watched from her seat, tears streaming down her face. She had known about the bracelet, had helped George make it during their family time at home, but she never expected him to present it during the coronation. Her heart swelled with pride at her son's courage and love for his father. This was exactly the kind of spontaneous, heartfelt gesture that would make William not just a good king, but a beloved one. The dignitaries in the abbey began to understand what was happening. Initial confusion gave way to deep emotion as they witnessed this pure display of familial love. Many found themselves wiping away tears, moved by the innocence and sincerity of the young prince's gesture. This was not about royal protocol. This was about a little boy loving his father. William carefully took the bracelet from George's hands, his own tears now flowing freely. He looked at the simple creation with the same reverence he might show the crown jewels. In his son's innocent gesture, he found the strength and purpose he needed to wear the crown. This bracelet would remind him always of what truly mattered in his reign. The little prince then did something completely unexpected. He reached up and gently touched his father's face, wiping away one of the tears with his small thumb. The gesture was so tender, so instinctively loving, that a collective intake of breath could be heard throughout the abbey. George was completely unaware of the cameras, the crowds, or the historic nature of the moment. He simply saw his father crying and wanted to comfort him. William couldn't help but smile through his tears. He pulled his son into a gentle embrace, careful not to disturb the ceremonial elements around them. The hug lasted only a few seconds, but it felt eternal. Father and son, future king and future heir, sharing a moment of pure love in the midst of ancient ceremony and modern spectacle. The Archbishop finally spoke, his voice warm with emotion. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "would you like to wear this gift during the ceremony?" The question broke protocol completely, but it felt absolutely right. William looked down at the bracelet in his hands, then at his son's hopeful face. Without hesitation, he slipped the handmade creation onto his wrist, where it sat alongside his formal ceremonial jewelry. Television commentators around the world struggled to describe what they were witnessing. Royal protocol experts were speechless. Social media exploded with reactions from viewers who were watching this unprecedented moment unfold. The story was already being shared millions of times, with people calling it the most touching moment in royal history. As William stood back up, the colorful bracelet visible on his wrist beneath the formal ceremonial cuffs, the Archbishop continued with the coronation. But everything had changed now. The ceremony was no longer just about ancient traditions and royal protocol. It had become deeply personal, infused with the kind of authentic emotion that makes history truly memorable. Prince George took his father's hand for just a moment before walking back to his seat with the same confident stride he had used to approach. The little boy seemed completely satisfied with his mission accomplished, unaware that he had just created one of the most viral moments in royal history. Catherine reached out to guide him back to his place, her face glowing with maternal pride and emotional overwhelm. The St. Edward's crown was finally placed upon William's head, but now it felt different. The weight was the same, but the meaning had been transformed. William no longer felt alone under the burden of kingship. He carried with him the tangible reminder of his son's love and the memory of his mother's spirit, which George had invoked with his innocent words. As the ceremony concluded with traditional hymns and prayers, viewers around the world were already sharing the video clip of George's unexpected gift. Social media platforms crashed under the volume of shares, comments, and reactions. The hashtag #BodyBraceletKing began trending within minutes as people expressed their overwhelming emotional response to the touching scene they had witnessed. Television networks immediately began replaying the moment from every available camera angle. Royal correspondents who had covered dozens of formal ceremonies found themselves struggling to maintain their professional composure as they described what had just occurred. Many admitted live on air that they had never seen anything so moving in their decades of royal coverage. The ceremony continued, but the atmosphere had completely shifted. What had begun as a formal, traditional coronation had become something unprecedented. The ancient abbey seemed warmer somehow, filled with an energy that hadn't been present before George's spontaneous gesture. Even the most stoic dignitaries found themselves smiling, touched by the pure emotion they had witnessed. International leaders who attended the ceremony later described it as the most memorable royal event they had ever witnessed. The President of France was overheard telling an aide that the moment had restored his faith in the human capacity for genuine emotion. The German Chancellor was seen wiping tears from her eyes, completely moved by the display of familial love. Back home, families gathered around televisions found themselves hugging their own children a little tighter. Parents explained to curious kids that they had just witnessed something very special, a moment when love mattered more than ceremony. Children around the world began making their own bracelets, hoping to give them to their parents as special gifts. The bracelet itself became an instant symbol. News outlets ran close-up photographs showing every detail of George's handmade creation. Craft stores reported massive increases in sales of colorful beads as children everywhere wanted to make similar bracelets. The simple plastic beads and elastic string had become more famous than many precious jewels in the royal collection. William completed the rest of the ceremony with visible emotion, frequently glancing down at the bracelet on his wrist. During his first speech as king, He paused to thank his family for their support, his voice catching slightly as he looked toward George. The little prince beamed with pride, finally understanding that his gift had been truly appreciated. Religious leaders from various denominations praised the moment as a beautiful example of love-transcending ceremony. The archbishop later revealed, in interviews, that he had never seen anything quite like it in his years of service. He described feeling moved to accommodate the unexpected gesture, sensing that it was somehow divinely inspired. As the royal family left Westminster Abbey, photographers captured William still wearing the handmade bracelet alongside his formal regalia. The image became instantly iconic, representing a new kind of monarchy that balanced tradition with authentic human connection. Royal fashion experts noted that this was the first time in recorded history that a monarch had worn a handmade gift. During their coronation, the story began appearing in newspapers around the world within hours. Front pages featured the image of father and son sharing their emotional moment, with headlines celebrating the touching display of family love. Editorial writers described it as a sign of hope for the monarchy's future, showing that royal duty and parental love could coexist beautifully. That evening, as the royal family gathered privately to celebrate, William still wore the bracelet. George ran up to his father, now fully understanding the importance of the day. He asked if Papa liked his gift, and William knelt down once again to tell his son that it was the most precious crown he had ever received. The days following the coronation saw an unprecedented global response to George's heartwarming gesture. Video clips of the moment were viewed over 500 million times in the first week alone. News networks that rarely covered royal events dedicated entire programs to analyzing the psychological and cultural impact of what viewers were calling the bracelet moment. Letters and packages began arriving at Buckingham Palace from children around the world. Thousands of handmade bracelets poured in, each accompanied by drawings and notes expressing admiration for Prince George's brave act of love. The palace staff, overwhelmed by the volume of mail, set up a special room just to handle the flood of correspondence from young well-wishers. Educational experts noted that the moment had become a teaching tool in schools across multiple continents. Teachers used the video to discuss themes of courage, family love, and the importance of genuine gestures over material wealth. Child psychologists praised George's natural instinct to comfort his father, calling it a beautiful example of emotional intelligence in action. The bracelet itself had become a cultural phenomenon. Major fashion designers began creating high-end versions inspired by George's simple creation, though critics argued that expensive imitations missed the entire point. The value was never in the materials, but in the love and thought behind the gesture. Museums requested to display the original bracelet as a piece of contemporary royal history. William made the decision to wear the bracelet during his first official state functions as king. Royal protocol experts initially questioned this choice, but public response was overwhelmingly positive. Citizens appreciated seeing their new monarch honor his son's gift, viewing it as evidence of his priorities and character. The bracelet became his signature accessory, more recognizable than any crown jewel. Catherine later revealed in interviews that George had been working on the bracelet for weeks, carefully choosing colors that he thought his father would like. She described finding him at the kitchen table, tongue poking out in concentration as he threaded each bead with determination. The creation process had taken him 3 separate sessions as his small fingers struggled with the elastic string. International. Child welfare organizations seized upon the moment as an example of the importance of children feeling heard and valued. The United Nations Children's Fund used images from the coronation in a campaign highlighting the significance of family bonds. George's gesture became a symbol of childhood innocence, making its mark on adult institutions. Royal biographers began re-examining the relationship between personal emotion and public duty in the monarchy. The coronation moment represented a departure from the traditionally stoic royal demeanor. suggesting a more emotionally accessible future for the institution. William's willingness to show vulnerability and accept his son's gift publicly signaled a new era of royal authenticity. The archbishop who presided over the ceremony received praise for his handling of the unexpected situation. Religious scholars noted that his decision to pause and accommodate George's gesture demonstrated wisdom beyond protocol. He later explained that he felt compelled to honor the pure intention behind the child's action, viewing it as a blessing upon the ceremony itself. Manufacturing companies reported massive increases in orders for craft supplies as families worldwide engaged in bracelet-making activities. Community centers and libraries organized bracelet-making for love workshops, inspired by George's example. The simple craft became a way for children to express affection for their parents and grandparents. Social media platforms were flooded with stories from parents sharing their own experiences of receiving handmade gifts from their children. The coronation moment had reminded adults everywhere to cherish these simple expressions of love. Many parents posted photos of themselves wearing their children's creations using hashtags like "love over crowns" and "precious gifts." Mental health professionals noted the therapeutic value of the global response to George's gesture. In a world often focused on material success and formal achievements, the moment served as a powerful reminder of what truly matters. Therapists reported using the video in sessions to help clients reconnect with the importance of authentic emotional expression. The economic impact was unexpected but significant. Tourism to London increased dramatically as people hoped to visit the locations associated with the coronation moment. Westminster Abbey reported record visitor numbers, with many guests specifically asking to see where George had presented his gift. The Royal Gift Shop began selling child-friendly craft kits, with proceeds benefiting children's charities. Universities began studying the moment from various academic perspectives. Communications scholars analyzed how the unscripted gesture had fundamentally altered public perception of the monarchy. Anthropologists examined the cultural significance of a child's handmade gift being incorporated into ancient ceremonial traditions. As weeks passed, the bracelet remained a constant presence on William's wrist. During important meetings with world leaders, signing of legislation, and formal photographs, the colorful beads served as a visible reminder of the personal values that would guide his reign. Foreign dignitaries often commented on the bracelet, providing opportunities for William to share the story and reinforce his commitment to family-centered leadership. Months after the coronation, the impact of George's gesture continued to resonate throughout society. The moment had fundamentally changed how people viewed the relationship between tradition and personal expression. Schools across the Commonwealth began incorporating lessons about the importance of spontaneous acts of kindness, using the coronation moment as a prime example. Child development specialists noted an interesting phenomenon emerging in playgrounds and classrooms worldwide. Children were more frequently engaging in gift-making activities, inspired by George's example of creating something meaningful with their own hands. Art teachers reported increased enthusiasm for craft projects, with many students specifically requesting to make bracelets for their families. The royal family's decision to embrace and celebrate George's gesture had profound implications for the monarchy's future relationship with the public. Opinion polls showed unprecedented approval ratings for King William, with many respondents specifically citing his reaction to his son's gift as evidence of his character and priorities. The monarchy had never seemed more relatable or human. Publishers rushed to produce children's books based on the coronation moment. The Little Prince's Gift became an international bestseller, teaching young readers about courage, love, and the value of homemade presents over expensive purchases. The book was translated into dozens of languages, spreading the story's message across cultural boundaries. Documentary filmmakers began working on comprehensive examinations of the moment's cultural impact. Television networks commissioned special Programs exploring how a single gesture had influenced everything from family dynamics to international relations. Film schools used the footage as a case study in authentic emotional storytelling. William established the Prince George Foundation for Creative Expression, dedicated to supporting arts and crafts programs in schools worldwide. The foundation's logo incorporated elements inspired by the famous bracelet, and its mission statement emphasized the importance of children having opportunities to create meaningful gifts for loved ones. The initiative received overwhelming support from donors globally. Catherine revealed that George had asked to make bracelets for his siblings and grandparents following the positive response to his coronation gift. The family began incorporating regular craft time into their schedule, with William actively participating despite his royal duties. These private family moments, occasionally shared through official photographs, continued to endear the royal family to the public. International diplomacy began incorporating references to the coronation moment. During state visits, foreign leaders often brought handmade gifts from children in their countries, acknowledging the new tradition George had inadvertently started. These gestures created warmer, more personal connections between nations, with diplomats noting improved relationships following such exchanges. Museums around the world requested exhibitions featuring the story of the bracelet moment. The Victoria and Albert Museum in London created a permanent display titled Love in the Time of Ceremony, showcasing George's bracelet alongside historical examples of personal items that had influenced public events. The exhibition became one of their most visited displays. Therapeutic communities found particular meaning in the coronation moment. Grief counselors noted that William's visible emotion upon receiving his son's gift had helped normalize male emotional expression. Support groups for bereaved families used the video as an example of how love can provide strength during times of overwhelming responsibility and loss. The anniversary of the coronation became known as Handmade Gift Day. In many countries, families established traditions of creating simple, meaningful presents for each other on this date. Retail analysts noted a shift in consumer behavior, with more people choosing to make gifts rather than purchase expensive items, inspired by George's example of thoughtful creativity. Religious communities of various faiths embraced the moment as an example of divine love manifesting through childlike innocence. Sermons and teachings frequently referenced the bracelet presentation as a reminder that the most profound spiritual moments often come through the simplest gestures. The story transcended religious boundaries, resonating with universal themes of love and family. Social workers reported increased interest in programs that brought children and elderly people together for craft activities. The Bracelet Bridge movement connected young people with senior citizens, encouraging intergenerational relationships through shared creative projects. These programs showed measurable improvements in mental health for participants across age groups. Fashion historians began studying the coronation as a turning point in royal style. William's choice to continue wearing the handmade bracelet during formal occasions challenged traditional concepts of appropriate royal accessories. Luxury brands began incorporating craft-inspired elements into their designs, though critics argued these missed the authentic spirit of George's original gesture. The psychological impact on children worldwide was perhaps the most significant long-term effect. Child psychologists noted increased confidence among young people in expressing affection for parents and authority figures. The moment had demonstrated that children's voices and gestures could have real impact, encouraging more open family communication. As the first anniversary of the coronation approached, anticipation grew about whether George would present another gift during the commemorative ceremony. The young prince, now more aware of his previous gesture's impact, worked secretly on a new creation, determined to honor the tradition he had unknowingly established during that unforgettable morning at Westminster Abbey. On the first anniversary of the coronation, Westminster Abbey was once again filled with dignitaries and cameras, but this time everyone waited with anticipation to see if Prince George would create another magical moment. The young prince, now fully aware of the attention surrounding his previous gesture, carried himself with a mixture of excitement and nervous responsibility. William wore the original bracelet during the anniversary ceremony, its colors now slightly faded from constant wear, but its significance only growing stronger. The sight of the handmade creation against his formal ceremonial attire had become an iconic image, reproduced on everything from postage stamps to official portraits. The bracelet had transcended its humble origins to become a symbol of modern monarchy. As the anniversary service began, George sat perfectly still beside his mother, but his small hands fidgeted with something hidden in his pocket. Catherine noticed his nervousness and gave him an encouraging smile. The entire royal family had learned to expect the unexpected from their youngest member, and they wouldn't have it any other way. During the moment of reflection dedicated to the previous year's achievements, George once again stood up from his seat. This time, however, his movement was more deliberate, less impulsive. He had clearly planned this moment carefully. The congregation held its breath, remembering the magic of the previous year and wondering if lightning could strike twice. George approached his father with measured steps, carrying a small wooden box that he had crafted himself with help from his grandfather's woodworking tools. The box was simple but beautifully made, with his initials carved carefully into the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft fabric, was not another bracelet, but something even more precious. The little prince had written a letter to his father, his first formal piece of writing. The words were simple but profound. "Dear Papa King, thank you for being the best daddy, even when you have to be king, too. I made this box to keep special things in. Love, George." The handwriting was shaky and imperfect, but every letter had been carefully formed with love and determination. William's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Tears flowed freely down his face as he read his son's words, the formal setting completely forgotten in the face of such pure love. The Abbey was silent except for the soft sound of William's emotional response and the collective intake of breath from everyone present. This moment was even more powerful than the previous year's surprise. The wooden box represented months of secret work by George, who had convinced palace staff to help him learn basic woodworking skills. He had spent countless hours in the workshop, determined to create something lasting for his father. The project had become a lesson in patience, persistence, and the satisfaction of creating something beautiful with one's own hands. As William opened the box, he discovered that George had included other treasures: a pressed flower from their garden at home, a small stone from their favorite beach, and a photograph of the family taken during a private moment of laughter. Each item represented a memory, a moment of joy that George wanted his father to carry with him always. The impact of this second gesture was perhaps even greater than the first. While the bracelet had been spontaneous and touching, this wooden box demonstrated growth, thoughtfulness, and a deeper understanding of the significance of giving. George had learned from his previous experience and created something even more meaningful. Television audiences around the world watched in amazement as history repeated itself in the most beautiful way. Social media exploded once again, but this time the response was more reflective, more appreciative of the deeper meaning behind George's actions. People began to understand that they were witnessing the birth of a new royal tradition, one that prioritized love and authenticity over rigid protocol. The wooden box became as famous as the bracelet, inspiring a global movement toward handmade, meaningful gifts. Woodworking classes for children experienced unprecedented enrollment as parents sought to encourage their own children's creativity. The simple pine box, with its childish carving and heartfelt contents, became more valuable than any crown jewel. William's acceptance speech that day included a special acknowledgement of his son's gift. He spoke about the importance of remembering what truly matters amid the responsibilities of leadership. The wooden box, he explained, would travel with him to important meetings and state functions, serving as a reminder of the love that gave his work meaning. In the years that followed, the anniversary of the coronation became known as Gift Day throughout the Commonwealth. Children and adults alike began creating handmade presents for loved ones, inspired by George's example of thoughtful creativity. The tradition spread far beyond royal circles, becoming a celebration of the power of personal expression and heartfelt giving. The story of George's gifts became legendary, passed down through generations as an example of how genuine love and spontaneous kindness can change the world. The little prince had unknowingly created a legacy that would influence not just his own family, but countless families around the globe. His simple gestures had reminded humanity that in a world of grand ceremonies and formal protocols, the most powerful moments often come from the purest hearts. As King William continued his reign, he kept both the bracelet on his wrist and the wooden box on his desk, visible reminders of his son's love and the values that would guide his leadership. The coronation had given him a crown, but George's gifts had given him something far more precious, the knowledge that he was loved not for his title, but for who he was as a father and as a man.